The 2024 season was a mixed bag for Mercedes and the W15, having produced a temperamental car rich in the right conditions, produced 4 race wins and 4 pole positions. Now, unfortunately for the team, it was hampered by a long-standing rear weak end through mechanical choices that they haven't been able to rectify thanks to design choices with the previous W13 and 14. But that for 2025 is going to change, as the team will at last be able to spend their budget on solving this particular problem with the upcoming W16. But as always, there are no guarantees. What you change will make a big difference. Now, this suspension issue, particularly at the rear end, is one that has been highly documented throughout 2025, and it's all to do with the mechanical platform. And the Mercedes team made changes to the front of the car in Austria, which I covered exclusively on the channel before any other YouTuber or even the official F1 channel did, where they made a front torsion bar change to try to rectify this particular issue, and it helped them to win 3 out of the remaining 4 races at the end of the first half of the season. But of course, with the huge issue being at the rear end, this wasn't going to solve even half of the amount of problems that they had. And with all of the budget in the off-season from 23 into 24 going on a fundamental aerodynamic platform change, none of the budget could be put towards the mechanical side of things with the Mercedes car. And essentially the platform in terms of mechanics is what they've been using throughout the entire ground effect era, starting with the W13 and 14, of course, which we know was highly flawed and was basically 2 awful cars. Now, what the team are looking to do for 2025 during the winter period is to potentially completely change the design layout of the rear suspension, going from a pushrod setup to a pull rod setup, basically going to what is utilized up and down the grid. And if you look at the customer teams from which that they give the gearboxing and casing and the rear end to, like for example Aston Martin, you could see, regardless of all of Aston Martin's fundamental design issues with their AMR 24, the rear end of that car, of course, comes from Mercedes, and they too struggled. So that is the main area of priority from which Mercedes will be looking to make vast changes. And this is all in tandem with this floor upgrade that we finally saw at the back end of the year. Now, with regarding that, certain rumors from Twitter accounts that say they have sources with Mercedes, who really knows if they do or don't, that can never be kind of quantified, but they say, and they're claiming as well as Amos, that 50% of that floor kind of will be staying the same because there's a lot of untapped potential. And of course, with a rear end change and with that particular floor setup change that they made at the end of 24, this could have a huge upturn in performance. Now, of course, there are also major other changes they will have to do fundamentally to the rest of the W15, such as the front wing. It'll be probably only slight changes, but this is all to make sure the harmony throughout the front to the rear end of the Mercedes W16 is working in tandem. You don't want a rear end and a front end which is completely disconnected from one another. You kind of need that balance between it. For example, look at the Ferrari car at the beginning of the turbo hybrid era in 2014. That car in Abu Dhabi, the last race of the season with Fernando Alonso, had oversteer and understeer throughout every single corner. It was an absolute junk of a car. Absolutely crazy what they managed to produce. I've never seen a car look so disconnected from the front to rear. Normally what happens is you have understeer in a certain corner in terms of the speed arrangement, and then you might have oversteer in another. But that car, from one corner face in sector 3, had understeer to oversteer to oversteer to understeer throughout all of the phases of a corner, from corner entry to mid-corner to corner exit. And that is what I'm talking about with a kind of disconnected front and rear end. You need everything to be working harmoniously between a Formula 1 car. And this also goes for the aero platform, the mechanical platform, the suspension platform, all of these things have to be calibrated to work with one another to get the maximum performance out of a car. This is what Mercedes will be looking to do. So what will this do for their season? Would it transform their W15, as this is basically what they would call their cousin in terms of the W16 for 2025? And of course, if things go in the avenue from which they would love it to go, this will hopefully, for their sake and just for the competitive pecking order for 2025, bring Mercedes firmly weekend in and weekend out in the ballpark of those front three teams. Because we saw last year when the right window was there for the W15, it was at times the leading pace setter in terms of cars. We saw it in Spa, we saw it in Silverstone. There was another place I can't really think off the top of my head where we saw it. But all of these have one thing in common: low track temperature, low ambient temperature. It was when the Mercedes came to life. The hotter a race was, the worse they performed. And that's what it's all about. It's also, of course, about widening the operating window from which they are using for the Mercedes car. And with Kimi Antonelli coming into the team and it being his first year, the easier a car they produce, the better it's going to be for his progress throughout the year. If they produce a real difficult car, which is highly unpredictable, this is going to hamper his learning, his experience as he goes through the first year with the team. And of course, with George Russell now leading, he will probably have to take the brunt of the experiments that Hamilton had to have done on his W15 throughout the 24 season, as has been well documented. But all in all, these changes should be, hopefully for their sake, successful and a positive step for the competitiveness that we will no doubt see in 2025. I really believe we're going to get a season where we could have the likes of, from the beginning, Ferrari, Red Bull, McLaren. Hopefully Mercedes can come into this, and maybe the Aston Martin team kind of can turn it around, but I have high doubts that they would. Where we have the front four teams being within a tenth or two of each other, not only in qualifying pace but race pace, and that will make for a fantastic season. Because as we all know, all the teams will have to be changing their focus towards 2026 and the major technical revolution that is coming then. Right guys, I'm going to wrap the video up here. Hope you've all enjoyed it. If you have, do leave a like on the video, comment down below anything with regarding it. And if you're new and have enjoyed what you've seen in this video, hit the subscribe button down below as well. Alright everyone, enjoy your holidays. Merry Christmas to all of you if you celebrate, and if you don't, just enjoy the time with your family as we all have a lot of time off. I'll catch you all with another video shortly.